The mountain man burst through Hattie Mee Jackson's door at dawn, wild-eyed and clutching a dying infant to his chest. The baby's lips were blue. His breathing came in shallow gasps that barely lifted his tiny ribs. "Please," the stranger begged, his voice cracking like dry timber. "He needs milk, real milk. I got nowhere else to turn." Hattie Mee stood frozen in her nightgown, the morning light catching the exhaustion carved deep into her dark face. She had been awake since before sunrise, as she had been every morning for the past 3 months. Sleep came hard when grief lived in your bones. The man before her was a wild thing. His beard hung matted and unkempt. His clothes carried the smell of wood smoke and desperate miles, but his eyes held something that stopped her breath. The same hollow ache she saw in her mirror each morning. "Where's his mother?" she whispered. "Gone." The word fell between them like a stone into still water. "They're both gone." The baby made a sound, not quite a cry, more like the whisper of wind through broken glass. Hattie Mee felt her body respond before her mind could catch up. The familiar tightness in her chest, the ache that had nowhere to go since she'd buried her own child beneath the cottonwood tree. She reached for the infant without another word. The baby was nothing but skin stretched over bird bones. His eyes were closed, but she could see the delicate blue veins beneath tissue-thin lids. When she pressed him against her chest, she felt his heart beating like a trapped moth. "What's your name?" she asked the mountain man. Jonas McAllister." She had heard that name whispered in town, the hermit who lived somewhere up in the high country, the one who'd lost his mind after losing his family. Looking at him now, she understood why mothers pulled their children closer when his name came up. But the baby in her arms was dying, and she had milk with nowhere to go. Hattie Mee walked to her rocking chair by the window, the same chair where she'd nursed her own son until fever took him. She sat down and began to unbutton her nightgown. "Turn around," she said quietly. Jonas McAllister spun toward the door as if her words had burned him. The baby latched immediately. His tiny fists pressed against her skin with surprising strength. The sensation sent waves of something she couldn't name through her body. Relief, grief, a desperate kind of hope. Outside, she heard footsteps on the porch. Mrs. Prudence Whitmore's morning walk always brought her past Hattie Mee's cabin. The woman had appointed herself the unofficial guardian of proper behavior in their small settlement. The footsteps stopped. Through the thin curtains, Hattie Mee could see Mrs. Whitmore's silhouette. The woman was peering through the gap in the fabric, her head tilted like a curious bird. Hattie Mee met her gaze through the window. Mrs. Whitmore's mouth fell open. Her eyes moved from the nursing baby to Jonas McAllister's broad back, then back to Hattie Mee's face. The scandal would be all over town before noon. "You can turn around now," Hattie Mee said softly. Jonas faced her with careful movements as if sudden motion might shatter something precious. His eyes found the baby first, then lifted to her face. "He's taking to it," he said. "He's hungry. Been hungry for a while by the look of him. 3 days I tried to keep him alive. Tried cow's milk, goat's milk, even chewed up hardtack and tried to get him to take that." His voice carried the weight of those 3 sleepless days. Nothing worked. The baby's breathing had already steadied. Color was returning to his lips. Hattie Mee felt his small body relaxing against her chest. What happened to his parents? Jonas looked toward the window where Mrs. Whitmore had been standing. The woman was gone now, probably running toward town with her news. Fever took them, found their place burned out. Nothing left but ashes and this little one crying in what used to be their root cellar. When? 4 days back. Hattie Mee studied his face. The man was holding something back. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, in how his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers when he spoke. "You know who they were. Settlers, that's all I know." Another lie, or at least not the whole truth. But the baby in her arms was alive and getting stronger with each passing minute. Whatever Jonas McAllister was hiding could wait. "He needs a name," she said. "His folks probably already gave him one." "His folks are gone. He needs a name for now." Jonas considered this. "Samuel, my brother's name was Samuel." The way he said it made her look up sharply. past tense. Another grief added to the weight this man already carried. Samuel it is then. They sat in silence as the morning light grew stronger. The baby nursed steadily, making small, contented sounds. Jonas stood near the door like he might bolt at any moment. Hattie Mee rocked gently, feeling something inside her chest that had been frozen solid begin to crack and shift. Outside, she could hear horses approaching, multiple riders moving fast. Jonas heard them too. His whole body went tense. "That'll be Sheriff Bramwell," Hattie Mee said calmly. "Mrs. Whitmore works fast when she's got gossip to spread. I should go. You should stay. Running makes a man look guilty." "I am guilty." The words hung between them. Samuel had finished nursing and was sleeping against her chest. His breathing was deep and even now. The sound of a healthy baby. Guilty of what? But Jonas McAllister was already reaching for the door handle. The horses were in her yard now. She could hear men's voices, Sheriff Bramwell's deep drawl rising above the others. "I'll come back," Jonas said, "when I can. This baby needs more than you can give him alone in those mountains." He stopped with his hand on the door. "I know. Then we need to talk, really talk, about what happened to his people and why you won't look me in the eye when you speak of them." Jonas McAllister nodded once. Then he was gone, slipping out the back as the sheriff's boots hit her front porch. Hattie Mee looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms. Samuel, such a big name for such a small thing. The knocking on her door was firm and official. "Hattie Mee, it's Sheriff Bramwell, need to have a word with you." She stood slowly, adjusting her nightgown to better cover the baby. Whatever storm was coming, she would meet it standing up. "Coming, Sheriff." Sheriff Cornelius Bramwell filled her doorway with his broad shoulders and suspicious eyes. Behind him stood two other men from town. Their faces carried the tight-lipped disapproval that spread through settlements faster than wildfire. "Morning, Hattie Mee." Bramwell's voice was careful, controlled. "Heard you had some trouble this morning." "No trouble, Sheriff, just helped a baby who needed help." His eyes moved to Samuel, still sleeping against her chest. The infant's breathing was steady now, strong. The blue tinge had left his lips completely. "Where's the mountain man?" "Gone." "Gone where?" Hattie Mee shifted Samuel to her shoulder. The baby made a small sound of contentment. "Didn't ask. Didn't think it was my business." Bramwell stepped inside without invitation. His boots left mud prints on her clean floor. The other men remained on the porch, but she could feel their stares through the open door. "Mrs. Whitmore says she saw something improper here." "Mrs. Whitmore sees improper behavior in Sunday sermons." The sheriff's jaw tightened. He had been calling on Hattie Mee for months now, bringing her small gifts, staying for coffee when she allowed it. She knew what people expected. A widow needed protection. A man needed a woman to tend his needs. But standing here with Samuel in her arms, she felt complete in a way she hadn't since losing her son. The sheriff's presence felt intrusive now, unnecessary. "This baby belongs with a proper family," Bramwell said. "The Whitmores have offered to take him in. The baby is being cared for by an unmarried woman who took up with a wild man she doesn't even know." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Hattie Mee met his stare without flinching. "I fed a hungry child, Sheriff, nothing more, nothing less." Bramwell looked around her small cabin, at the rocking chair by the window, at the cradle in the corner that had sat empty for 3 months, at the baby clothes she had washed and folded but never put away. "The mountain man say when he's coming back. He said he would. Don't count on it. Men like that don't stay nowhere long." After the sheriff left, Hattie Mee sat in her rocking chair and watched the sun climb higher. Samuel woke every few hours to nurse, then slept again. Each time he seemed stronger, more present in the world. Jonas returned 3 days later. He came at dusk, moving quiet through the cottonwoods. He had cleaned himself up some, trimmed his beard, changed his clothes, but his eyes still carried that haunted look. "How is he?" "Growing, getting stronger." Jonas sat on her porch steps without asking. The distance between them felt careful, measured. Neither wanted to give the town more fuel for their gossip. "I brought supplies." He nodded toward a pack by the door. "Baby things, food for you. Where did you get baby clothes? Traded for them in the next settlement over. She studied his profile in the fading light. The careful way he held his shoulders, the tension in his hands. You planning to stay this time? For a while, gotta figure out what's best for the boy. Samuel had been sleeping against her chest, but he stirred at the sound of Jonas's voice. His small eyes opened, focused. For a moment, uncle and nephew looked at each other across the evening air. He knows you, Hattie Me said softly. Jonas's throat worked. He looked away toward the mountains. That night Jonas slept in her barn. The arrangement felt temporary, fragile, but Samuel slept better with his uncle nearby. Hattie Me found herself listening for the sounds of Jonas moving around outside, the quiet ritual of a man settling in for the night. The town's judgment came in waves over the following weeks. Women crossed the street to avoid her at the market. Reverend Hoskins delivered sermons about moral conduct and the corruption that crept into Christian communities when good people turned away from righteousness. But Samuel thrived. He gained weight. His eyes grew bright and alert. He smiled when Hattie Me spoke to him, reached for Jonas when the mountain man held him. Jonas proved useful around the property. He fixed her roof, chopped winter wood, tended her few animals with gentle hands. He worked with the focused intensity of a man trying to earn his place. They spoke little during the days, but in the evenings, when Samuel was fed and content, Jonas would sit on the porch steps and Hattie Me would rock in her chair. The silence between them grew more comfortable, less weighted with suspicion. You know the Garrett family? Jonas asked one evening. Hattie Me's rocking slowed. I knew them some. Nice people, had a spread about 10 miles north of here. That's where I found him, at their place. You said it was burned out. It was. House was nothing but ashes and charred timber. Found Samuel in what was left of their root cellar. She waited for him to continue, but Jonas had gone quiet again. His hands worked at a piece of wood he was carving. Some kind of small toy for Samuel. What happened to them? Fever. Both of them died in their bed. Baby was crying in that cellar, probably had been for days. The story felt true but incomplete. Hattie Me had learned to read the spaces between Jonas's words, the things he couldn't quite bring himself to say. You knew them before you found Samuel. It wasn't a question. Jonas's hands stilled on his carving. Some? How well is some? A wind had picked up, stirring the cottonwood leaves. The sound covered Jonas's long silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Well enough. That night Samuel developed a fever. It came on sudden and fierce. His small body burned against Hattie Me's chest. His breathing grew rapid and shallow. Jonas paced her small cabin while she tried everything she knew. Cool cloths, gentle rocking, prayers whispered against Samuel's burning forehead. We should get the doctor, Jonas said. Doctor won't come, not for this situation. Then I'll bring him. You'll get yourself arrested. Sheriff's been asking questions about you. Jonas stopped pacing. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest you're not just some random hermit who happened across a dying baby. Samuel's fever broke just before dawn. His breathing eased. The terrible heat left his small body. But the crisis had changed something between Jonas and Hattie Me. They had tended the child together through the long night, shared the fear of losing him. In the gray light of morning, with Samuel sleeping peacefully between them, the truth felt closer to the surface. Hattie Me could see it in the way Jonas looked at the baby, not just with care but with something deeper, more personal. She began searching through Jonas's belongings while he slept in the barn. It felt like a violation, but Samuel's illness had shown her how much she had come to love the child, how much losing him would destroy what was left of her heart. She found it in his saddlebags, an old family Bible with pages soft from handling. The inscription on the front page made her sink into her rocking chair. Property of the Garrett family. Thomas Garrett and Jonas Garrett, brothers in Christ. Samuel wasn't just some orphaned child Jonas had rescued. He was family, blood family, and Jonas had been lying about it from the beginning. Hattie Me closed the Bible and held it against her chest. Outside, she could hear Jonas chopping wood for her stove, the rhythmic sound of an axe biting into timber. the sound of a man working to earn his place in a world that had no easy spot for him. She looked down at Samuel, sleeping in his makeshift cradle, the baby she had fed from her own body, the child who had given her a reason to wake up each morning. Whatever Jonas McAllister was hiding, whatever lies he had told, Samuel was thriving under their shared care. But lies had a way of growing in the dark spaces between people. Eventually, they demanded light. Hattie Mee opened the Bible again and began to read. Hattie Mee waited until Jonas finished his morning chores before confronting him. She sat in her rocking chair with Samuel on her lap and the family Bible open beside her. The inscription faced up where Jonas could see it when he entered. He stopped in the doorway when his eyes found the book. His shoulders sagged. All the careful distance he had maintained for weeks collapsed in an instant. You went through my things. Samuel had a fever. I was scared. People do foolish things when they're scared. Jonas stepped inside and closed the door. His movements were slow, defeated. He looked at the Bible but made no move to take it from her. Thomas was your brother. Yes. Samuel is your nephew. Yes. The simple admissions hung in the air between them. Samuel made a contented sound and reached for the Bible's worn pages. Hattie Mee gently moved his small hands away. Why lie about it? Jonas sat heavily in the chair across from her. For the first time since she had known him, he looked directly into her eyes when he spoke. Because Thomas threw me out of the family 10 years ago, told me I was dead to him, said if I ever came back he'd set the sheriff on me. What did you do? I married a Crow woman named Silent Water. Thomas said it was an abomination, said I was choosing savages over my own blood. The words came slowly, each one pulled from some deep place Jonas had kept locked away. Hattie Mee rocked gently, waiting. She died giving birth to our son. The baby died too. Winter was hard that year. I buried them both under the snow and didn't come down from the mountains for 3 years. Samuel had fallen asleep against her chest. His breathing was soft and even. The fever hadn't returned. When I found Thomas and his wife, they'd been dead maybe a week. Fever took them fast. Samuel was in that root cellar, crying so hard he barely had voice left. You could have brought him to town. Let proper folks care for him. Jonas's hands worked at his knees, the same restless motion she had seen when he was thinking through difficult things. I tried, got as far as the church steps, but I kept hearing Thomas's voice. How he said I wasn't fit to be around decent people, how my blood was tainted. So you decided to care for him yourself. I tried, God knows I tried, but I'm not built for raising babies. Don't know the first thing about keeping something so small alive. Hattie Mee studied his face, the deep lines around his eyes, the way his beard couldn't quite hide the gauntness in his cheeks. That's when you came to me. I was desperate. Samuel was dying and I didn't know where else to turn. Heard there was a woman living alone who might have milk. Didn't think beyond getting him fed. But you stayed. He was thriving. You were healing him in ways I couldn't. Seemed wrong to take him away from that. Outside, horses approached at a gallop, multiple riders moving fast. Jonas was on his feet before the sound fully registered. That's more than just Sheriff Bramwell, Hattie Mee said quietly. Through her window, she could see 4 men dismounting. Bramwell was there, but also Deputy Walsh and 2 men she didn't recognize. Official-looking men with hard faces and federal badges. You're wanted for something more than lying about Samuel, she said. Jonas nodded grimly. Mining company contract up in Colorado. Left before my time was up. They call it desertion. Why did you leave? Company was working men to death, treating them worse than animals. I couldn't stay. The knocking on her door was sharp and official. Hattie Mee rose carefully, keeping Samuel close to her chest. Jonas McAllister, Sheriff Bramwell called through the door. We know you're in there. Come out peaceful and nobody gets hurt. Jonas looked at Samuel sleeping in Hattie Mee's arms, his nephew, the last piece of family he had left in the world. They'll take him, he said quietly, not without a fight. You can't fight federal marshals, Hattie Mee, and you can't raise a white child in this territory without proper papers. People won't stand for it. The knocking came again, harder this time. "We're coming in, McAllister." Jonas walked to the door and put his hand on the latch, but before he could open it, Hattie Me spoke. "There's something else you're not telling me." He turned back to her. She was still sitting in her rocking chair, but her free hand was resting on something beside the Bible, a folded piece of paper that had been tucked between the pages. "I found this while you were chopping wood yesterday." She held up the paper. Even from across the room, Jonas could see the familiar handwriting, his brother's careful script. "It's addressed to you," Hattie Me said. "Dated 3 months ago." The door burst open before Jonas could respond. Sheriff Bramwell entered first, followed by the federal marshals. Their eyes swept the small cabin, taking in the domestic scene, the woman in her rocking chair, the baby in her arms, the mountain man standing frozen by the door. "Jonas McAllister," one of the marshals said, "you're under arrest for breach of contract and desertion." They moved to restrain him, but Hattie Me's voice cut through the tension. "Sheriff Bramwell, I need to speak with you about this child's welfare." The sheriff paused. "What about it?" "Before you take Mr. McAllister away, you should know that Samuel is his nephew, his blood kin, and his brother left instructions about the boy's care." She held up the letter. The paper caught the morning light streaming through her window. "Thomas Garrett wrote to his brother before he died, asked him to come home, asked him to be Samuel's guardian if anything happened." The room went quiet. Even the marshals stopped their movements to listen. Thomas was looking for Jonas when the fever struck his family. He wanted to make things right between them. Jonas stared at her with something between gratitude and amazement. She had found more than just his identity in that Bible. She had found his brother's forgiveness. Sheriff Bramwell took the letter and read it slowly. His expression grew troubled as he worked through Thomas's words. "This changes things," he said to the marshals. "Don't change nothing about our warrant," one of them replied. "Man still got to answer for his crimes. But it changes things about the boy." Hattie Me stood slowly, still holding Samuel. The baby was awake now, his eyes moving between the faces of the strange men in his small world. "There's going to be a town meeting about Samuel's future," she said. "People have opinions about his care, about whether I'm fit to raise him." She looked directly at Jonas. Maybe it's time they heard the whole truth. The marshals cuffed Jonas and led him toward the door, but he stopped and turned back to Hattie Me. "If they take him from you, don't let him go to just anybody. He needs someone who will love him." "He needs his family," she replied, "whatever's left of it." After they took Jonas away, Hattie Me sat alone with Samuel and read her brother's letter. Thomas's words carried the weight of regret and the desperate hope of a dying man reaching out to the brother he had wronged. The town meeting was set for the following Sunday. By then, everyone would know the truth about Jonas and Samuel, about the lies and the family connections and the federal charges. But they would also know about Thomas's letter, about a brother's forgiveness, about a man who had spent 10 years in exile trying to live with the consequences of love. Hattie Me looked down at Samuel, who was watching her with bright, alert eyes. Whatever happened at that meeting, whatever the town decided, she would not let this child suffer for the sins and secrets of the adults around him. She had fed him from her own body when he was dying, had nursed him through fever and fear, had rocked him to sleep more nights than she could count. Blood might make Jonas his uncle, but love had made her his mother. The town meeting filled the church to standing room only. Every pew held families whispering behind gloved hands. Every face carried judgment already formed. Hattie Me sat in the front row with Samuel on her lap, surrounded by empty space that marked her isolation. Judge Harrison had ridden in from the territorial capital, a thin man with wire spectacles and the bearing of someone accustomed to deciding other people's fates. He sat behind the pulpit where Reverend Hoskins usually delivered his sermons about moral conduct. Jonas stood in shackles between two federal marshals. 4 days in jail had hollowed his cheeks further, but his eyes were clear, focused. When Samuel saw his uncle, the baby reached out with both small hands. The gesture sent murmurs through the crowd. "We're here to determine the welfare of the child known as Samuel," Judge Harrison began. and to address the charges against Jonas McAllister. Mrs. Whitmore rose from her pew. Her voice carried the authority of someone who considered herself the moral center of the community. Your Honor, that child needs to be with a proper Christian family. The Whitmore family has offered to provide him with a good home and proper upbringing. Heads nodded throughout the church. The solution seemed obvious to most. A white child belonged with white parents, a respectable family with means and standing. Hattie Me stood slowly. Samuel was awake and alert in her arms, his eyes taking in the sea of faces around them. Your Honor, may I speak? Judge Harrison adjusted his spectacles. You may. This child came to me dying. His lips were blue, his breathing so shallow I could barely see his chest move. His uncle brought him to me because he had nowhere else to turn. Her voice carried to the back of the church, strong and clear despite the weight of every stare. I fed him from my own body when no one else could. I nursed him through fever. I rocked him to sleep when nightmares made him cry. I have been his mother in every way that matters. But you're not his mother, Mrs. Whitmore interrupted. Not his real mother. Hattie Me looked down at Samuel. The baby was watching her face with the intense focus that small children reserve for the people they trust most. No, I'm not his real mother. His real mother died of fever along with his father, but I'm the mother he has now, the mother he knows. She reached into her dress pocket and pulled out Thomas's letter. The paper was worn soft from handling. Thomas Garrett wrote to his brother before he died. He asked Jonas to come home, asked him to be Samuel's guardian. He wanted to make things right between them. Judge Harrison took the letter and read it slowly. The church had grown quiet except for the sound of wind moving through the eaves. This is Thomas Garrett's handwriting, the judge said. I knew the man, did business with him several times. He looked at Jonas. Your brother cast you out of the family 10 years ago. Why would he write asking you to return? Jonas's voice was rough from days of silence. Because he was dying, because he had a son who needed family. And because he realized he was wrong, Hattie Me added. About love. About what makes a family. Sheriff Bramwell stood up from his seat near the back. Your Honor, there's still the matter of the federal charges. McAllister's got a warrant for desertion. The man fled a mining operation that was killing workers, Hattie Me said before the judge could respond. He left because staying would have meant compromising his conscience. She turned to face the crowd. Samuel shifted in her arms but remained quiet, as if sensing the importance of the moment. Jonas McAllister could have left Samuel to die in that root cellar, could have walked away and let someone else deal with the problem. Instead, he carried that baby for 3 days, trying everything he knew to keep him alive. Her voice grew stronger. When nothing worked, he swallowed his pride and came to me. A woman he didn't know. He begged for help because that child's life mattered more than his own comfort. That don't change the law, Mrs. Whitmore said. No, it doesn't change the law, but it speaks to character, to the kind of man Jonas McAllister really is. Judge Harrison was quiet for a long moment. He studied Thomas's letter again, then looked at Jonas, then at Samuel in Hattie Me's arms. The federal charges stand, he said finally. Mr. McAllister will serve 6 months for breach of contract. The church erupted in murmurs. Jonas's shoulders sagged. However, the judge continued, raising his voice over the noise, the child's welfare takes precedence. Thomas Garrett's letter clearly indicates his wishes regarding Samuel's guardianship. He looked directly at Hattie Me. Miss Jackson, are you willing to serve as Samuel's legal guardian during Mr. McAllister's incarceration? I am, Your Honor. And Mr. McAllister, do you consent to this arrangement? Jonas looked at Samuel, then at Hattie Me. I do. Then it's settled. The child will remain with Miss Jackson. Mr. McAllister will report to territorial custody tomorrow morning. Mrs. Whitmore stood again, her face flushed with indignation. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. That woman is unmarried. She has no means to properly provide for a white child. That woman, Judge Harrison said quietly, has kept this child alive and thriving for weeks. The arrangement stands. 6 months later, Jonah's returned to find Samuel sitting up on his own and reaching for everything within his grasp. The baby had grown strong under Hattie Mee's care. His eyes were bright and curious. His laughter filled her small cabin. Jonah's had built a cabin on the ridge above Hattie Mee's property during his sentence. The territorial prison had work programs for men with carpentry skills. He'd earned materials and labor help by teaching other inmates to work with wood. The cabin was small but solid, close enough that Samuel could move between both homes as he grew, far enough to quiet the town's concerns about propriety. They settled into a rhythm over the following months. Jonas worked his land and helped with Hattie Mee's chores. She continued to be Samuel's primary caregiver, while Jonas taught the boy about the mountains and the wild things that lived there. The town gradually accepted the arrangement. Samuel was clearly thriving. He was a happy child who showed equal affection for both his caregivers. The scandal had burned itself out in favor of newer gossip. On Samuel's first birthday, they gathered in Hattie Mee's cabin for a quiet celebration. She had baked a small cake with honey from her hives. Jonas had carved a set of wooden animals for the boy to play with. Samuel sat between them on a blanket, examining a wooden horse with intense concentration. When he looked up, his face split into the wide grin that had become the center of both their worlds. "He's walking now," Hattie Mee said. "Just a few steps, but he's getting stronger." "Thomas would have been proud," Jonas replied. "Thomas would have been grateful for what you did, for what we both did." Samuel dropped the wooden horse and pushed himself to his feet. He stood swaying for a moment, then took 3 careful steps toward Jonas. When he reached his uncle, he grabbed Jonas's shirt and pulled himself close. Jonas lifted the boy and settled him on his lap. Samuel immediately reached toward Hattie Mee, wanting both his parents close. They sat together as the sun set beyond the mountains. 3 people bound not by blood or law but by choice, by the daily decision to love and care for each other in a world that offered few easy paths. Samuel babbled contentedly, secure in the knowledge that he was wanted, that he was home. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods with the sound of whispered promises. The land stretched away toward distant peaks, wild and beautiful and full of possibility for a child who would grow up knowing that family was something you built with your hands and your heart. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.